Hi friends, in this tutorial series we'll be implementing examples using Spring Boot and OpenAI. In this tutorial we'll be interacting with Azure OpenAI using Spring AI module. For this I'll be taking reference of my website javanews.com. So here go to the Spring Boot AI section. So here we have Spring Boot AI Azure OpenAI Hello World example. So this is the first tutorial of this section. I'll be adding more tutorials to this section like Spring Boot AI prompt engineering, Spring Boot AI RAG process which stands for retrieval augmented generation. So go to the Spring AI Azure OpenAI Hello World example. In this tutorial, we'll be walking through the process of setting up Azure OpenAI and connecting it with Spring AI. In today's technology landscape, it has become increasingly important to integrate the artificial intelligence capabilities into our Spring Boot applications. Azure OpenAI, it provides powerful AI modules that can be seamlessly incorporated into our Java applications. This article will be exploring how to connect the Spring Boot application to Azure OpenAI, using which we'll be harnessing the power of advanced language models into our enterprise applications. This is the Spring Boot application that we'll be creating. So in this application, we'll be creating a controller named prompt controller, and this prompt controller, it will be responsible for creating the OpenAI client and configuring it. Using this OpenAI client will then send a request to Azure OpenAI, which will then return back a response, and this response it will be returned back to the user. So let us begin with the implementation part. We'll first be configuring the OpenAI models in the Azure portal. For this, go to portal.azure.com. Here you'll need to sign in with your credentials. Once you are in the Azure portal, go to the Azure OpenAI service. Here I'll be creating new Azure AI service. So click on create button. Resource group, I'll just be giving it as Java, the one I had created before. Name, I'll be giving it as Java News-service. You can give any name. Pricing tier, I'll be selecting the standard one. Next, and I'll be submitting this request. So this will create the Azure OpenAI service for me. So here we'll go to the created resource. So here Java News service has been created for us. Next, we'll be opening this Java new service in the Azure AI Foundry portal. So Azure AI Foundry portal, it is a unified platform for building, evaluating and deploying AI models. So go to this Azure AI Foundry portal. So this will open the Java new service in this Foundry portal. Next, using this Azure AI Foundry, we'll be deploying the OpenAI model. So here go to the deployments, deploy model, deploy base model. These are the various AI models provided by the Azure AI Foundry, and we'll be selecting the GPT-4o model here. Confirm. Deploy to selected resource. So this GPT-4o model has been deployed for us. Next, we'll be configuring the Spring Boot application to connect to this GPT-4o model. For this, you'll need to copy this target URI and the key. So copy this. Similarly, copy the key. This will be configuring in the Spring Boot application to connect to the GPT-4o model. The deployed GPT-4o configuration that we just copied to Notepad++. Later on, we'll be creating the Spring Boot application, and here in the application.properties, we'll be adding those configurations. So we'll be creating a property Azure OpenAI API key, and to this we'll be copying the key that we got for the deployed GPT-4o model. Similarly, we'll be having the endpoint property to which we'll be adding the endpoint of the deployed GPT-4o model. And finally, the model ID will be GPT-4o, since that is the model that we are deploying. Next, in Eclipse, we'll be creating a Spring Boot application using which we'll be interacting with Azure OpenAI. For this, go to Eclipse, and here I'll be creating a new Maven project. Create a simple project. Group ID, I'll be giving it as pom.java news. Artifact ID, I'll be giving it as Spring AI OpenAI. Click on Finish. So here the Maven project has been created for us. If we go to the pom.xml, here we'll be adding the required dependencies. The dependencies that we'll be adding are the Spring Boot Starter Web dependency, as we'll be exposing a REST endpoint. The other dependency that we'll be adding is the Azure AI OpenAI dependency. Using this dependency, we'll be integrating the Spring Boot application to the Azure OpenAI model that we deployed. So copy this. Next, right click on the pom.xml and do a Maven install. So this will download all the Maven dependencies that we have specified in the pom.xml. So here Maven install, it has downloaded the dependencies that we had specified in the pom.xml. The build is failing because for the Spring Boot application, we need to specify the main class, which we have still not specified. So let us create the Spring Boot main class. So we'll be creating the Spring Boot Bootstrap class with the name Azure OpenAI application, which will be having the Spring Boot application annotation. Using this, we'll be starting our Spring Boot application. So let us create this class. Create a new class. Package will be com.azure AI OpenAI usage. Copy the contents of this class. Next, we'll be creating a simple model class to handle incoming questions. So the user, he will be asking some questions, and the response for this, it will be provided by the OpenAI model. So this question, it will be there in this question string field. So let us create this prompt question model class. Create a new class. Copy this content. Next, in the source mail resources, let us create the configuration file named application.properties. In this configuration file, we'll be adding the properties that we had discussed before. I had copied the key and the URL here, so this will be the key. And the URL of the resource will be this. The deployed model ID is GPT-4o only. Next, we'll be creating a class name prompt controller in which we'll be exposing a post endpoint. Using this post endpoint, the user he will be sending the question which he wants to be answered by Azure OpenAI. So the controller it will get this question, send it to Azure OpenAI. Once it receives the response, it will send the response back to the user. For this class, we have used the REST controller annotation. Next, let us have a look at the post method that we have exposed in detail. So to this method, we pass the prompt question as the request body. So this prompt question will have the question that the user wants to ask to Azure OpenAI. In this method, first using the OpenAI client builder, we create an instance of the OpenAI client. Using this OpenAI client, we'll be interacting with the Azure OpenAI model that we have deployed. To this OpenAI client, we provide the Azure endpoint that we have configured in the application.properties, and in this class using the value annotation, we are providing it. Next to the OpenAI client builder, we pass the credentials. So here in credentials, we provide the Azure key credentials to which we pass the Azure OpenAI key. So this is the secret key that we have configured in the application.properties and we make use of to connect to the Azure OpenAI instance. And finally, we call the build client method of the OpenAI client builder, which gives us the OpenAI client instance. Next, we'll be creating an array list of type chat message. So a chat message, it represents a single conversation between this Spring Boot application and the deployed Azure AI model. Next, we create a chat message to which we give the system role. And here we set the content that you are an AI assistant that helps people find information. So here we are creating a persona for the AI model and we are telling that you are an AI assistant. Now suppose we have a scenario where we want the AI model to act as a psychiatrist. Then in set content, we would have set the message that you are a psychiatrist and you should help people. So the AI model would then behave as a psychiatrist. Using system messages is one of the important principles of prompt engineering, and in next tutorial we'll be looking at it in detail. Next, we create another chat message and this time its role is of type user. For this, we set the content as the question that has been passed by the user in the prompt question. So here in get prompt method, we extract the question that is there in this prompt question and pass it as a content for this chat message. Next, we create an object of type chat completions options, and to this we pass the chat messages that we just created. Also for the chat completion options, we configure some other parameters like the temperature. For temperature, we set it to the value 0.7. Temperature, it controls the randomness of the response. So a lower value, it will make the output more focused and deterministic, whereas higher value, it increases creativity and randomness. So using this 0.7 value, we strike a balance between coherence and variety. The other parameter that we'll be configuring is the set top p parameter. So whenever OpenAI model, it is going to predict the next move or the next step, it will only consider those steps or moves whose probability it is greater than 0.95. Finally, we set the set max tokens to 800. So here we are limiting the response to 800 tokens. So these are the parameters that we are configuring here. Next, using the getChatCompletions method of the OpenAI client, we'll be making a call to the Azure OpenAI model. To this method, we'll be passing the deployment or model ID, which in our case is the GPT-4o model, which we have configured in the application.properties. And also we'll be passing the options, that is the chat completion options that we just created. Once this call is made to the Azure OpenAI model, we get the response in chat completions. So we iterate through this chat completions object and we get the response, which is then returned back to the user. So let us create this prompt controller class. Go to Eclipse and create a new class. Copy the contents of this class. So we are done with all the coding changes. Let us now test if our application it is working properly. So I'll be starting the Spring Boot application. So here the application it has started successfully. Next, go to any API client like Postman. In my case, I'm making use of Bruno. So here our application it is running on port 8080 and we have exposed a post mapping with the URL /answer. And here in the request body for the post call, I'm going to pass a question and the question is how much does using Azure OpenAI cost? So let us make this call. So here the deployed GPT-4o model, it is correctly giving me the response about how much the Azure OpenAI service it will cost me. Similarly, I can ask any other question like what is the diameter of Earth? So here it is giving me the answer. So our Spring Boot Azure OpenAI application, it is working properly. Hope you have understood this tutorial. You can download the source code from here. Thank you.